Hello everyone and welcome to today's video where we're going to be looking at the harmony, and in particular we're going to look at key chords. So what do we know? Based on our last video when we looked at the harmony, we learnt quite a lot about the choice of harmony that Bach has used. We noted that there was frequent use of chord 1, 2 and 5. Chords frequently occurred in inversions, so he was changing the order of the chords, whether it was a first inversion, second inversion, and in some cases, a third inversion. Bach also used added seventh chords throughout, and these included a dominant seventh chords, so 5-7, or it's sometimes seen as V7, and often he used seventh chords in chord 2. In particular, he used these chords in inversions. So we had chord 2 with the added seventh and in first inversion. I spoke about it previously that occasionally when he used the dominant sevenths, he occasionally used them in third inversions. So often seen as V7D. Which means that the seventh note of the chord is in the bass. So already we can see that Bach is using a rich array of chords, whether it's inversions, sevenths, or just using chord 1, 2 and 5 throughout. We are going to be looking at 3 unique chords which happen in Badinerie. And the first chord that we're going to look at is suspensions. Now, suspension or a suspension chord, this means that one note from the previous chord is held while the chord changes. And that held note then resolves. It then drops, it goes lower to create what is a bit of dissonance to then consonance. And we're going to talk about that and I'm going to demonstrate it. When we're looking at chords or we're looking for suspensions, in the annotated score you'll notice that it will have the Roman numeral followed by 4 to 3. This signifies that it is a suspension. But let's put it in context. What does it sound like? Well, for the time being, for an example, I'm just going to work in C major. So we're going to look at a V7 chord in C major. Chord 5-7, a dominant seventh chord in C major, which would be a G chord, which is a G, B, D and F, and it sounds like this. As I said, a suspension is when one note is held while the chord changes. So I want you to imagine that the chord that follows this is a C major chord. However, C major chords have C, E and G in it, not C, F and G. So we can now see that the note that is going to be held on while the chord changes is the F, which then would explain the 4-3. So that's telling us count 4 notes up from C. So we've got C, D, E, F. So here's what it sounds like. I'm going to do my dominant 7th chord, or the G7 chord, and then it's going to go to the C chord, but it's going to have that F, which is a suspension. And you're going to hear a bit of dissonance, so it's going to sound like the sounds are rubbing. There's 5-7, and then doesn't really sound finished, does it? It sounds, there's a bit of crunchiness going on there. There's a bit of dissonant. So what happens is that F can't stay there. That F cannot stay there forever. That F must resolve. So it must resolve, it must change. It needs to go lower, it needs to drop down. And of course, this is where the 3 comes in. Remember, the 4 is telling us count 4 notes higher. C, D, E, F. F is the 4th note. So it needs to resolve. The F needs to drop lower and resolve to an E. So here is the dominant 7th again, the G7 chord, G, B, D, F. Now here's the chord 1, 4, and resolve. Now that's nice. Here it is, a bit quicker. So suspensions add that bit of dissonance to a piece of music, just a bit of a crunchiness to it, a bit of pepper to the music, the musical sounds. And of course Bach has used these suspensions in 3 places. Now first of all we're going to look at section A, and remember we are looking for a little 4 and a little 3, and there's 2 places that it happens in section A. One is in bar 8, which I've just circled, and one is in bar 10. Now, to remember this, it actually happens where the sequences lie. So when we looked at the melodic devices that Bach was using in previous videos, we commented that sequences were used around bar 6 to 10. Now, Bach is also using suspensions in bar 8 and 10, so it links up to the suspensions, so we can think of suspension and sequence, S and S. So suspensions in bar 8 and 10. It also happens only once in section B, and again we're looking for that 4 and 3. And we can find that there is a suspension being used in bar 32. Again, this links with the sequence. It's around here that Bach is using a sequence in the melody. So S and S, suspension, sequence. There's links there which helps us when we are learning and revising this piece of music. There are 2 more important chords in this music, and the first one is a Neapolitan chord, and a Neapolitan chord looks like this. So it's a little flat sign, chord 2 in first inversion. Now a Neapolitan chord is a chromatic chord, so it's a chord that does not belong in the key signature, and in this case it's when a minor chord then becomes a major chord, and we're dealing with B minor at this point. So chord 2 would be our C sharp chord, and what will happen when the Neapolitan chord is that C sharp chord becomes a C major chord. Now this C natural does not belong in the key of B minor. Remember, it has 2 sharps. It does not belong in this key. So this is a chromatic chord. It does not belong in the key signature, this Neapolitan chord. It only happens once, and it is a big deal. And another chord to note is what's called a secondary dominant. And this is a chord that kind of fools you. It makes you think that the music has modulated. It makes you think that the music has changed key, but it actually hasn't. It's just borrowed another chord from another key signature and put it into the piece of music. And it kind of makes you think that it's modulated, but it actually hasn't. It hasn't changed key at all. So let's find these. Now the easiest thing is both these chords occur in section B. So half of the problem is done for us. First of all, we're going to note our secondary dominant, which we can find in bar 24. And we can note it's in bar 24 because we can see with the Roman numerals that we're using. So this is a secondary dominant. Remember me saying that it kind of fools you? So he's actually using a C natural here. And you probably think to yourself, hold on a minute, he's changing key. But he actually isn't, because, again, we don't really see anything else after this to imply it has changed key. And what's also really important about this chord is this is a dominant 7th in 3rd inversion. So the 7th note is in the bass. In this case, it's C. is in the bass. And the next chord is the Neapolitan chord, which occurs in bar 35. And again, remember me saying that Neapolitan chord is a chromatic chord. At this point, it's a C major chord, which would not belong in the key of B minor. So again, that chromatic chord, it shouldn't really be there. It's not part of the key signature. But this type of harmony can just add something different and make it a bit more interesting when we're listening to it. And what's also really important to note is it's also in first inversion. And we can see, because of the little B at the side, which implies first inversion. So this is a C major chord in first inversion, so the E is in the bass. But it's actually a Neapolitan chord. That is it, everyone. Now, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for listening and understanding this piece of music. Remember to just keep going back over the videos, keep going back over the score. Keep reminding yourself of all these fantastic features and devices that Bach has used to create Badinerie. I will see you soon. Thank you very much.